Tonight, the latest developments demand your full attention, and once you hear this, you'll understand why. Because what we're about to walk through isn't just celebrity gossip, it isn't just political drama, and it certainly isn't just Hollywood headlines. What we're talking about tonight is a pattern of power, of image, of influence, and of the lengths people will go to protect all three. So settle in, because this one is going to take you on a ride. Let's begin where the conversation started this week, with Meghan Markle and a diamond ring that has set the internet absolutely on fire. Now, if you've been following the Sussex saga at all, and let's be honest, it's hard not to, you already know that Meghan's relationship with her original engagement ring has been, let's say, complicated. Prince Harry designed that ring himself. He personally selected diamonds from his late mother, Princess Diana's own collection, and had them set into a piece that was meant to be one of the most emotionally meaningful gestures a man could make. It wasn't just jewelry, it was history, it was heritage, it was a direct, tangible connection to one of the most beloved women the world has ever known. And that's not an exaggeration. Diana's legacy is woven into the fabric of modern culture in a way that very few people's are. So when Meghan began modifying that ring not once, but multiple times, resetting the band, altering the design, people noticed and people talked. Because when you change a ring that was built from Princess Diana's diamonds, you're not just making a fashion choice. You're making a statement. Whether she intended it that way or not, the optics were difficult to ignore. Critics said she was hard to please. Supporters said she had every right to wear what she wanted. And the debate has been simmering ever since. But now, this week, we have a new development, and it has sent that simmer straight to a boil. Meghan has been photographed wearing a diamond ring that experts are estimating falls somewhere in the 6 to 7 carat range. Let that sink in for a second. 6 to 7 carats. And the valuation? Experts are putting it at approximately $250,000 US, $250,000 on her finger, at a time when she is publicly and loudly telling the world that she is in pursuit of joy, that she is finding herself, that she is living authentically and on her own terms. And look, I want to be fair here, because fairness matters. A woman wearing expensive jewelry is not a crime. A woman choosing to upgrade her accessories is not inherently a scandal. But the context is everything. Because this isn't just any woman. This is a woman who walked away from the British royal family while telling a global audience that it was the institution's coldness, its rigidity, its obsession with image and tradition that made her life unbearable. And now, years later, she is quite visibly leaning into a lifestyle that is, by any measure, deeply image-conscious, heavily luxury-oriented, and unapologetically Hollywood. And that original ring, the one with Diana's diamonds, appears to have been quietly set aside. You have to ask yourself what that means. I'm not here to tell you what to think about Meghan Markle, but I do think it's worth sitting with the symbolism for a moment. Harry's mother died in a car crash in Paris in 1997. The world grieved. Harry was 12 years old and had to walk behind his mother's coffin in front of billions of watching eyes. Those diamonds were his way of keeping her close, of making sure that even on his wedding day, even in the most intimate gesture of love he could offer, his mother was there. That was the intention. That was the heart behind the ring. And whether you believe the modifications and the apparent sidelining of that ring were thoughtless, deliberate, or simply the result of personal taste, the optics continue to feed a narrative that the Sussex brand has drifted very far from the values it once claimed to be built on. Commentators have pointed out that what we're seeing is less about authenticity and more about aspiration, specifically the aspirational Hollywood luxury that plays well on social media, attracts brand deals, and keeps the couple relevant in a media landscape that is always hungry for the next story. Is Meghan happy? She says she is. She says she's found joy. But people are watching, and people are asking, what does joy look like when it comes with a $250,000 price tag? And more importantly, what happened to the ring that carried the spirit of a princess, who by all accounts genuinely was beloved? These are uncomfortable questions, but they're being asked loudly, and they're not going away. Now, if you're finding this conversation compelling, if you think this kind of analysis matters, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now. Because we do this every single time. We don't just skim the surface, we go deep. We look at what's actually happening beneath the headlines. And if you want to drop a comment below, I want to hear from you. Do you think Meghan had the right to move on from that ring? Or do you think there was a more respectful way to handle it? Let me know. The comments are open and I genuinely read them. Now, let's shift gears, because the next story is one that I genuinely did not see coming. And I think your reaction is going to say a lot about where you stand politically, and maybe even personally. US Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and musician Kid Rock appeared together this week in a video that has since gone completely viral. The video promotes what has been dubbed the Rock Out Workout, and it features the two men hitting the gym, getting into the sauna, and taking cold plunges. It is exactly as wild as it sounds. And yes, for those of you who have already seen the clip, RFK Jr. does appear to be in the pool wearing jeans, full denim, in the water. Now, I'll be honest with you, my first reaction was confusion. My second reaction was laughter. But my third reaction, and this is the one that stayed with me, was something closer to grudging acknowledgement, because there is a method to what looks like madness here. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has built his entire public identity, his entire political brand, around the concept of personal wellness. He talks about physical health, mental resilience, clean living, and the importance of taking care of your body as a form of civic responsibility. He has positioned himself as someone who doesn't just talk about health, he lives it. And whether you agree with his politics or not, whether you think his views on vaccines and public health policy are well-founded or dangerously misguided, you cannot look at that man and say he doesn't practice what he preaches. He is visibly, physically in shape, he is active, he is energetic, and now he is the United States Secretary of Health. But think about that for a second. Think about the optics of having a health secretary who is out here doing cold plunges and gym sessions and posting it for the world to see. Whatever you think about the policy positions, the visual message is undeniably on brand. And in a media environment where visual messaging often matters more than substance, that counts for something. Kid Rock's presence in the video adds a layer of cultural currency that I think a lot of people are underestimating. Kid Rock has a specific audience, a deeply loyal, working-class, patriotic, American flag-waving audience that feels largely ignored by mainstream media and mainstream politics. By appearing alongside Kid Rock, RFK isn't just promoting a workout routine. He's speaking directly to a demographic that is skeptical of government institutions, but might actually listen to a guy who shows up in their cultural space and says, hey, take care of yourself. Your health matters, America. Is it unorthodox? Absolutely. Is it a little chaotic? Without question. But is it effective? I think the view count on that video answers that question pretty clearly. And look, there's something almost refreshing about watching a member of a presidential cabinet do something genuinely unexpected and human. Politics has become so sanitized, so scripted, so carefully managed by communications teams and PR consultants that when someone just shows up in jeans in a pool with Kid Rock, people stop and pay attention. And attention in this media landscape is everything. The man was in denim in the pool, and people are talking about health and wellness because of it. You have to give credit where credit is due. All right, let's move on, because our next story takes us into very different emotional territory. And if you've ever been through a separation or a divorce, this one might hit closer to home than you expect. Nicole Kidman, one of the most acclaimed actresses of her generation, an Oscar winner, a global icon, a woman who has navigated Hollywood for decades with a level of grace and professionalism that very few people can match. And now, according to reports, she may have a new man expressing interest in her, and her ex-husband Keith Urban is reportedly not taking the news well. Here's the situation as it stands. Paul Salem, the chairman of MGM Resorts, has reportedly expressed interest in getting to know Nicole on a personal level. Salem is described as an older, distinguished, and extraordinarily wealthy man, the kind of figure who operates in a world of influence and power that most people never get anywhere near. And according to sources close to Keith Urban, he is, to put it bluntly, furious. Now, here's where I want to add a little human reality to this conversation, because I think the instinct to laugh at Keith Urban's reported jealousy or to dismiss it as hypocritical, given the rumors that he moved on with someone younger almost immediately after the separation, that instinct is understandable, but it's also worth pausing on. Breakups are messy, divorces are messy, even when two people agree that things aren't working, even when the writing has been on the wall for a long time. Seeing your former partner move forward, especially if they're moving towards someone successful and powerful, has a way of hitting differently than you expected. It doesn't always make logical sense, it's not always rational, but it's profoundly human. The heart doesn't operate according to fairness or logic, and jealousy has a way of showing up, even when you know on some level that you have no right to it. That said, if the reports are accurate that Keith moved on quickly with someone else, and the rumors have been persistent enough that they're difficult to entirely dismiss, then the optics of his reported rage are, at minimum, complicated. Because there is a version of this story where Keith Urban left one of the most respected and powerful women in the entertainment industry, found comfort elsewhere almost immediately. and is now unsettled by the idea that she might find happiness with someone else. And that version of the story does not reflect particularly well on him. What's interesting here isn't the jealousy itself. What's interesting is what it reveals about Nicole Kidman's position in the cultural landscape. When you are at the level that she is, when you are an Oscar-winning actress with decades of acclaimed work behind you, with global recognition and genuine industry respect, the people who might be interested in you are not small. They are Paul Salem types. They are MGM Resorts chairman types. They are potentially new Hollywood power couple types. And if Nicole Kidman ends up in a high-profile relationship with someone of that stature, the conversation very quickly shifts from Nicole's divorce to Nicole's extraordinary reinvention. And that is a shift that, reportedly, Keith Urban is not emotionally prepared for. What do you think? Do you feel any sympathy for Keith Urban in this situation? Or do you think Nicole is simply living her best life and he has no right to feel any kind of way? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm genuinely curious where people land on this one. Now let's talk about something that has implications far beyond celebrity relationships or political theatrics. Because the next story touches something that affects every single person who picks up a phone and tries to understand what is happening in the world. A bombshell study from All Sides, a media organization specifically focused on identifying political bias in news coverage, has revealed that Apple News' editorial team has been deliberately and systematically excluding conservative media outlets from the app's curated top stories. And the data, according to those who have reviewed it, is not subtle. It is striking. Let me give you the big picture here, because this matters regardless of where you fall politically. Apple News is not some niche app that a few political junkies use. It is a default news application on millions of iPhones. It is the first thing millions of people see when they swipe to check what's happening in the world. And if the editorial team responsible for curating those top stories is consistently elevating outlets from one side of the political spectrum while sidelining outlets from the other, the effect on public understanding, on public perception of reality is enormous. This is not a new complaint. Conservatives have been raising concerns about Apple News' curation practices for years. What is new is the attempt to quantify it, to move the conversation from "this feels like it's happening" to "here is the data showing that it is happening." And that shift from perception to documentation is significant. Because here's the thing. Everyone understands that editors make choices. Every news organization, every platform, every curator makes decisions about what to highlight and what to downplay. That is the nature of editorial work. But when a platform has the scale that Apple has, when we're talking about a default application that sits in the hands of hundreds of millions of people, the editorial choices made by a small team of people can shape what an enormous portion of the population understands to be true about the world. And if that shaping is happening in one consistent political direction, then we are no longer talking about editorial judgment. We are talking about platform influence at a scale that has genuine consequences for democracy, for public discourse, and for the social fabric. Think about it in practical terms. If someone relies primarily on Apple News for their understanding of a major news event, an immigration story, a crime story, a policy debate, and the sources they're being shown are drawn from only one side of the political spectrum, then they are not getting information. They are getting a curated version of events, and they may not even realize it because the platform presents itself as neutral, as comprehensive as the news. That is a profound responsibility. And according to this study, it is a responsibility that is not being handled even-handedly. The question that needs to be asked and answered is why this is allowed to continue. Because the stakes are not abstract. When people get incomplete information about a charged event, the consequences can ripple outward in very real ways. Emotions get inflamed, perspectives get distorted, and people make decisions about who to vote for, what to protest, what to believe, who to trust, based on information that was never complete to begin with. This deserves a serious, sustained conversation. And the fact that it has taken a formal study to bring it back into the spotlight says something important about how comfortable the technology industry has become with this kind of influence. Now, I want to talk about a story that is murkier, darker, and ultimately more disturbing than any of the others we've covered tonight. Because what is unfolding around Jeffrey Epstein's files and the people connected to him is not just a celebrity story. It is a story about power and about what powerful people do when they think no one is watching. Len Wexner, the billionaire founder of the Victoria's Secret empire, has been deposed as part of a congressional investigation into the Epstein files. Wexner was questioned about his long-term relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, who served as his personal financial advisor from the late 1980s until at least 2007. And the scale of that connection is staggering. Wexner's name appears more than 4,000 times in the documents released by the Department of Justice. 4,000 times. In his testimony, Wexner told the panel that he was conned by Epstein, that Epstein lived a double life, that he had no idea who he was really dealing with. He described Epstein as a clever, diabolical master manipulator and expressed that he deeply regretted ever knowing the man. Now, I want to be careful here because we are talking about serious allegations and a very complicated legal and moral landscape. Les Wexner has not been charged with any crime, and the claim that someone was deceived by Jeffrey Epstein is not on its face implausible. Epstein was, by all accounts, extraordinarily skilled at cultivating trust, projecting credibility, and operating in plain sight while concealing the full scope of his activities, but 4,000 mentions in the released documents is not a footnote. That is a central thread. And the public, quite reasonably, is asking hard questions about what exactly that relationship looked like, what Wexner knew, and when he knew it. What's also notable is who else is appearing in these documents, and in what volume. Other prominent names, including members of the Clinton family, have been mentioned in connection with the Epstein files, though in significantly smaller numbers than Wexner. And the public responses from those individuals have ranged from carefully worded denials to outright dismissal of any meaningful connection. Whether those denials hold up to scrutiny as more documents are released remains to be seen. What we know for certain is that the Epstein story is not over. It is not a closed chapter. It is an ongoing excavation of a network that operated at the highest levels of wealth and influence for decades, and the full picture has not yet emerged. As more files are released, more names will surface, more questions will be asked, and the people in those files will have to decide how to respond. The world is watching, and the world has a very long memory. Now let's close out tonight with a story that is in some ways a referendum on the current state of Hollywood and on the relationship between celebrity, politics, trade and the audience that ultimately decides whether any of it succeeds or fails. Disney's live-action Snow White remake has officially been declared a financial disaster. Forbes has reported that the studio netted a loss after all was said and done, having spent approximately $336 million to make and market the film and recovering only a fraction of that at the box office. The numbers do not lie. This was, by any measure, a spectacular failure. And the question being asked across the industry is, why? The film starred Rachel Zegler, a young actress who, on paper, had a lot going for her. Talent, visibility, the backing of one of the most powerful studios on the planet. But something went wrong, and there are a few different theories about what that something was. One theory is that the audience simply didn't want another live-action remake of a beloved animated classic. Disney has been in this business for years now, and the fatigue is real. There are only so many times you can remake the same story before audiences start asking why they should bother. That's a legitimate structural criticism of the studio's strategy, and it applies regardless of who is starring in the film. But the other theory, and this is the one that has dominated the conversation, is that Rachel Zegler's own public behavior played a significant role in the film's failure. In the lead up to the release, Zegler made a series of comments and social media posts that were, depending on your perspective, either honest expressions of her personal values or a masterclass in how to alienate a massive portion of your potential audience. She was outspoken, she was combative, she was, according to multiple reports, specifically asked by Disney to dial things back, and she didn't. She went in the opposite direction. And I want to sit with that for a moment because I think it's more complicated than either side of this debate wants to admit. On one hand, yes, an actor has the right to their own opinions. An actor has the right to speak their mind, to advocate for causes they believe in, to be a full human being with a political consciousness. That is not inherently wrong. It is not inherently career limiting. Plenty of very outspoken actors have continued to have very successful careers. But there is a difference between having opinions and actively alienating the audience. You need to buy tickets. There is a difference between advocacy and contempt. And if the perception, whether fair or not, is that an actor has expressed contempt for half of the potential audience, that half is going to make a very simple economic decision. They're going to spend their entertainment dollars somewhere else. The ticket sales told the story, and now, by multiple accounts, Zegler's Hollywood profile has become significantly quieter. She has reportedly moved to London to focus on stage work. The industry, which tends to be very forgiving of political expression when it comes from the left, apparently drew a line at someone who was explicitly warned to be more careful and chose not to be. In an industry built on controlling the narrative, controlling the image, controlling the message, an actor who cannot be managed is ultimately a liability. Is that fair? Is that the right way for the entertainment industry to operate? Those are genuinely interesting questions. But the more immediately relevant question is this: has Disney learnt its lesson? Maybe. The financial pain of this failure is significant enough that it's hard to imagine the studio not doing some serious internal reflection. But history suggests that Hollywood has a short memory when it comes to this kind of thing. The temptation to push cultural messaging through blockbuster films is deeply embedded in the current studio culture. And as long as the people making the decisions are insulated from the consequences, as long as it's the shareholders and the audiences and the exhibitors who absorb the losses rather than the executives who greenlit the project, the lesson may not stick as deeply as it needs to. Time will tell. And audiences, more than ever, are paying attention. Tonight we covered a lot of ground: a $250,000 diamond ring and the symbolism it carries, a health secretary doing cold plunges in jeans, a jealous ex-husband and a Hollywood icon moving forward, a tech giant shaping what millions of Americans believe to be the news, an ongoing excavation of the darkest network in recent memory, and a box office disaster that raises hard questions about art, politics, and who ultimately holds the power in the entertainment industry. These stories are not separate. They are all part of the same conversation about power, who has it, how they use it, what happens when they abuse it, and what it looks like when ordinary people push back. And that is a conversation worth having every single day. If you've made it this far, I want to say something directly to you. Thank you, genuinely. You chose to spend your time here to think critically, to engage with stories that matter. That means something. Now do one more thing. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, because we do this every time and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Hit the like button if this gave you something to think about. And leave a comment. I want to know which story tonight hit hardest for you. Was it The Ring? The Apple News bias? The Epstein files? Tell me, because your perspective matters and this conversation is better when you're part of it. Stay sharp, stay curious, and we'll see you next time.